Dear friends, thank you for not leaving me without work and for bringing me back to you. As a token of my gratitude, let me share a short joke with you. Night. A sleeping couple is lying in bed. The doorbell rings. The couple wakes up. The woman says, "Quick, my husband is back." The man jumps out of the window. As he is falling, he starts to think, "Shit, I am the husband." Yes, this is an old and well-known joke, but how do you like the idea? Telling a joke before each story. Please share your opinion in the comments. And now for the serious stuff. Let's go. What are the odds? I haven't seen or heard from her in 10 years. Of course, that's because I disappeared and did everything I could to not be found by her new husband, and his family. I was pretty successful at it too. Yet there she was, standing in a booth at the expo for the same convention I was attending. She even walked right past me without even recognizing me. When that thought struck me, I began to form a plan. Oh yes, I can be a real jerk at times. I should give you a bit of background here. You may also be wondering why my ex-wife's husband's family would be looking for me. It probably has something to do with the fact that they, at one time, were also my family. You see, her current husband is biologically my older brother. Of course, his parents are also biologically my parents, and his 2 younger sisters are my biological sisters as well. When everything blew up, I simply walked away and created a new life for myself. So, my name is Marvin Anderson. It's been my name for the last 10 years. Marvin, because that was my given middle name. And Anderson because I looked up and saw the sticker for an Anderson window when I was trying to think of a good last name to use. The woman I've been talking about is Beverly Curtis. She was Beverly Stinson in high school. Long drawn-out high school romance here. Use your imagination. Yes, we were high school sweethearts. Yes, we gave each other our virginities after our senior prom. Yes, I was in love with her. Yes, she was in love with me. Well, okay, with my family's money too. Too bad I didn't know that at the time. Yeah, my family had money. Mom and Dad owned a medium-sized manufacturing plant. We manufactured electronic components. We had several standard components, but that wasn't our main source of income. Seriously, the Chinese kicked our butt with their prices. We kept it up with the Made in America requirements. Most of our market was small-scale, high-value items. It was specialty components that we designed and built based upon the customer's needs. It turned out that it was highly profitable. Okay, so some info on my family. There was Mom and Dad, of course. They started the business before I was born. Dad had a degree in electronic engineering. His best friend had a degree in manufacturing engineering. My great-grandfather on my dad's side had made a ton of money during the Depression by loaning money to people who couldn't afford it to buy houses. When they couldn't make the payments, he foreclosed on the land. He actually sold the same piece of land several times to different people. Maybe that explains where my family got their serious lack of morals from. So Brad is my older brother. I told you about Mom and Dad. I also have twin sisters that are younger than me. Truthfully, they were the babies of the family and the only daughters. Yes, they were spoiled. Their entire outlook on life was that if it didn't directly affect them, they didn't give a rat's behind. If it did somehow affect them, they went with the decision that least affected them. That probably explains their behavior when the stuff hit the fan. So, cliché after cliché, we got married just after our sophomore year in college. We had been married for 5 years when I came home early one day and found her in bed with my older brother. Long story short, I was just a stepping stone to her. Brad would eventually take over the family business, and I would remain a glorified worker bee. Sure, I would be technically second in charge, but it would be Brad with all the power, prestige, and access to society. Bev and I went to high school together. We had started dating during our senior year. We both went to the local college. She ended up pregnant at the end of our sophomore year, so we got married over the summer. She dropped out to raise the baby while I went on to finish my degree. We had lots of help from my family. We were both 20 years old when we got married. Once Jenny turned 2 years old, Bev went to work as an administrative assistant at my family's business. They had an on-site daycare for their employees. I had to wonder how she got pregnant since we always used condoms. None ever broke as far as I know. She had a bad reaction to the pill, so she wasn't on it. Oh well, stuff happens. I did notice that there were a couple of weird episodes over the next 5 years. Twice she had some strange issue that prevented us from having sex for about a week. I didn't really think much of it at the time. I wanted more children, but it hadn't happened yet. I was hoping that we would have a boy this time. I did love my daughter, but every husband wants at least one boy to carry along the family name. Yes, I hear all you feminists out there who say the woman can keep her married name. I also hear all of you screaming that a father can teach his daughter all the things he can teach a son. Yes, girls can be gearheads and appreciate muscle cars and racing just like boys. Yes, they can become mechanics, get into sports, and everything else. Again, it's one of those things that are programmed into men's brains. They want a son as an heir. Don't get me wrong here. I loved my daughter and was happy that we had her. Adding a son to the family would be icing on the cake. Our 5-year anniversary was coming up at the end of the week. I had ordered her a nice matching set of earrings and a necklace from a local jeweler. I snuck out of the office to pick it up, and I was going to sneak home to hide it while Bev was still at work. We both worked at my family's business. They had a daycare for employees, so she didn't need to worry about watching our daughter. I picked up her gift, then rushed home. As I was approaching the house, I saw Brad's car in the driveway. That was really odd. He was supposed to still be at work, and he had no business being at my house at this time of day. I got a bad feeling about this. I parked on the street 2 houses down and walked to the house. The door was unlocked. I quietly followed the sounds and made my way to the master bedroom. Sure enough, Brad and Bev were both there, having a grand old time. To this day, I'm still not sure how I managed to keep my temper in check. Regardless, I managed to get a good 5 minutes of video before sneaking back out of the house. I had heard some of their talking. It sounded like this had been going on for a few years at least. Despite the rage that I was feeling, I knew that I had to take the time to get all the information and put a plan together. Flying off the handle would only cost me more money and humiliation. The divorce laws in this country screwed over the innocent husbands while rewarding the cheating wives. That was especially true if there was a child involved. She would get the house, and I would get the mortgage. She would get custody and child support, and I would get missed visitations. She would get alimony, now called spousal maintenance, and I would get the honor of paying her to have sex with other men. In order to minimize the damage, I had to keep this a secret until I was ready to strike. Oh, and she would not be getting the jewelry I just bought for her. It took 3 months before I was ready. Now, you may be expecting me to tell you all the clever ways I went about avoiding having sex with the woman, and you would be wrong. She is a beautiful woman with a fantastic body. I drilled her as much as I could. Besides, it wasn't like I was really risking getting a disease. She was only screwing my brother, not the whole town. The other thing was that if I tried to suddenly begin avoiding sex, she would get suspicious. No, I didn't in the award-winning performance of being the loving husband and father. Besides, I did not want to pay someone I don't know to get off. I didn't mention it before, but I was the 8th manager for the company. It became apparent that the rest of the family thought so little of me that they must have never even thought about that little fact. My team was responsible for all the software, hardware, and programming on every computer and machine in the company. I had unlimited access to everything that required any sort of computer code. I am the only one in the company with what I call the God codes. Those codes give me unlimited access to every machine the company owns: laptops, desktops, smartphones, CNC machines, 3D printers. Hell, I even reprogrammed the coffee makers in the break room. A little piece of advice: if you're going to screw over the it guy, Don't use company assets to discuss it. 5 minutes after getting to my office, I was reading all their text messages and emails. Yes, I said all their messages. I started with just Bev's and Brad's. From there, I found out that my parents had known about it as well. One text from Mom was even discussing it with the twins and cautioned them to make sure that they didn't somehow let me know. Yes, my entire family not only knew that my brother was screwing my wife, but they also seemed to approve of it. Now you were probably thinking that I was at the edge of the breaking point. You would be correct. I really didn't see how this could get any worse. That was when it got exponentially worse. Jenny wasn't even my daughter. She was Brad's daughter. Those 2 episodes that I mentioned earlier that prevented us from having sex for a while. Abortions. She had 2 abortions because I was the biological father. She had Brad's baby but aborted my 2 children. They needed to pay. They needed to pay a lot. The more I discovered, the more I planned. Don't ever mess with the it guy. You may be wondering why I know. It turned out it was just plain old greed. Brad was being groomed to take over the company. I was never going to be more than a shareholder, a minor one at that, and kept on as the head of it. They were going to string me along as long as they could before Bev asked for a divorce, so she could marry Brad. His income was going to be much higher than mine ever would. Why the wait? It's simple. They needed me to keep the machines going until they could find someone to replace me if needed. Sure, they hoped I would just accept the situation and stay, but they also wanted a backup plan in case I left. Besides, I was raising their child and supporting Bev, so Brad had less to pay out. He could build up his finances to better take care of his wife and child later. They were also planning on never telling me about the true parentage of Jenny, thus leaving me on the hook for boatloads of child support payments. For the next 3 months, I began to slowly siphon money from our accounts to a new account in the Cayman Islands. I sold Bev on the idea of taking out a second mortgage on the house to install a huge swimming pool and entertainment area in the backyard. Of course, she agreed to that. It would make it so she and Brad could do more entertaining, and I would be on the hook to pay for it. It took a full month for the loan to go through. I stashed that money in the offshore account as well. I would bring home some designs about once every 2 weeks to show her that I was working on it. I did the designs myself while I was supposed to be working. I even put a notice on an online website that we would be taking bids on the work. We ended up interviewing 5 different contractors. I hired a private investigator to place hidden cameras in the house while Bev was at work. They were high definition and also recorded audio. Everything was recorded to a cloud server that could only be accessed by me, the PI, and my divorce lawyer. I continued to copy all their emails and text messages. I also printed out hard copies and kept them in a new safety deposit box I had opened in a different bank under a new name, Marvin Anderson. I'm not a stupid person. I knew that when the stuff hit the fan, every one of them would be beyond belief. They would begin a campaign of harassment and try to recoup the cost for the damage I was about to unleash. I created a couple of online social media profiles. I also created a fake website showing that Marvin Anderson was a very wealthy entrepreneur. He had an MBA as well as 2 bachelor's degrees, one in business administration and the other in international finances. Neither would hold up to any real scrutiny, but that wasn't really necessary at this point. Forged documents are also fairly easy to obtain if you know where to look. It only requires an official-looking photo or 2, some false information, name you want to use, address, and some other info purchased off the dark web, and a transfer of a small amount of cash. About 2 weeks later, you get an anonymous package delivered to your office. Don't ever mess with the it guy. Yeah, you can't simply rely on the words of liars and cheats. I had a DNA test done as well. I swabbed Jenny's cheek as she was sleeping, after I swabbed my own cheek, then managed to get Brad's DNA off a glass he had used during a party. I sealed everything up and shipped it off. I used my company email to get the results. After all, I was the only one in the company that could access anyone else's email, and I was actually looking forward to them finding that email after I left, and they began their own investigation. Okay, so you can pretty much figure out that I was going to burn Bev in the divorce. You can also see that Brad was going to be singed a bit as well. Now to roast Brad and the rest of the family. Brad wasn't going to be too hard. Brad was a bully as well as being an arrogant fool. All I really needed to do was let him be himself. When he took over the company, he would drive it into the ground. His ineptitude would ensure the company's demise within a couple of years. Not only would the company go bankrupt, but he would become a pariah in the industry for destroying a very profitable business. I figured that I could help him along in that endeavor. First off, I figured that the family owed me for what they were doing and planned to do to me. I did what I do: fake accounts, fake invoices, a couple of lines of code in the financial programs. Nothing too big that would be noticed, but big enough to hurt when they found out. Also, it was big enough to set me up financially for a long time if I needed it. Marvin Anderson was about to become rather wealthy. The next thing was to build and set the timer for the bomb. This took me a week to build. No, it wasn't a literal bomb that would cause physical destruction and injuries. I'm a computer programmer, not a criminal. This was a software bomb. It would cause havoc, but only in the financial and efficiency of the company. It was set to go off with a specified set of circumstances. I could either set it off by command, or it would go off when certain pre-programmed events took place. It would cause every computer and smartphone in the entire company to simultaneously crash. Every computer-controlled machine would suddenly either stop working, or, worse yet, go haywire. For those that went haywire, I had a special plan. Those were the CNC and milling machines. Finally, the day came. I know I probably should have done it differently. It probably would have been better, or at least safer, if I had not actually been there. Me being there gave them the chance to physically confront me. That was a downside. It meant that they could possibly hold me there and physically threaten me. Yes, that was kind of foolish on my part. Still, a train wreck is fascinating. There is a reason people cannot look away when they see one about to happen. It is almost unheard of to get enough advance warning of one so you can plan on being there and watching it. I simply couldn't resist. Also, I did have a plan to distract them long enough to make my escape if need be. It wasn't needed. I was in the main lobby of the offices when I saw her walk in. She was mid-20s and dressed professionally. I have to say, she was absolutely gorgeous. She was carrying a briefcase and 3 manila envelopes tucked up under her arm. That was the signal for me to begin smiling. I walked into my father's office. "What's this?" he asked as I tossed a sealed envelope on his desk. Instead of answering, I held up my hand with all 5 fingers spread. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I counted as I lowered my fingers individually. During the countdown, a loud moaning wail was heard from outside. 5 more fingers were held up and another countdown. "What the hell?" A man's voice was heard yelling. One last countdown, and the blonde bombshell appeared in my father's doorway. "Mr. Nathan Curtis," she asked in a Georgia drawl that sounded like peaches and honey. "Yes, I am," he replied. She handed him the last envelope, then stated, "Y'all have been served. Have a nice day." She took a quick photo of him holding the envelope and was out the door. That should explain everything. I laughed and quickly made my exit before anyone could get their wits back and make my departure difficult. The letter that I dropped on my dad's desk was my immediate resignation, citing a hostile work environment. This was based upon the company's management and owners accepting as well as encouraging the sexual relationship between the president of the company and the wife of one of their managers. Of course, Bev was served with divorce papers, and Brad was served with a lawsuit for creating a hostile workplace and alienation of affection. I was also suing him for back child support, as well as future child support. I had removed all of my personal effects from my office a couple of days ago. I also had quietly removed everything that I wanted from our house. All the financial stuff had been taken care of as well. The divorce gave Bev the house, and I had cleaned out most of the savings account. My lawyer had a power of attorney, so she could act on my behalf without me actually being present. When the door closed behind me, Michael Curtis died, and Marvin Anderson came to life. That was the last time I saw any of them for the next 10 years. Counseling was ordered. My lawyer had no idea where I was, and I wasn't telling her. It was dropped. I was ordered to pay child support. My lawyer had all the evidence that she wasn't my child, and that they had deliberately deceived me on that fact. My countersuit against Brad for child support was successful. She tried for alimony. I was no longer employed, and she was now making more money than I was. My lawyer graciously refused any alimony payments from her. As for the house, my lawyer produced a quitclaim and told her she could have it. The rest of the assets that were still there were given to her. Brad was moved in before the week was out. I had relocated to the West Coast, so the alienation of affections lawsuit went nowhere, as they usually do. Brad did need to pay me a couple hundred for creating a hostile work environment. He was the boss, and screwing an employee's wife did not go over very well with the judge. The company settled for about $2 million when the evidence showed that they knew and were actually encouraging the affair. I ended up with just over $4 million between the lawsuits and all the money I skimmed, as well as the investments and savings I took. Yes, she should have gotten half the savings and investments, but good luck finding me or the money. I waited for about 6 months after all the suits were settled before I triggered the bomb. It fried the servers and rewrote all the coding for the CNC machines. Financial data was lost, and the machines began spitting out products that were out of spec. It took 2 weeks before everything was fixed. That was 2 weeks with no production. That threw off a lot of the scheduling and caused several missed deadlines. I ended up starting my own IT consulting company. I used an offshore LLC to keep my name off of it. I became fairly successful. 2 years after I left, I was involved in a traffic accident. It required some rather significant facial reconstructive surgery. I decided to use that to my advantage and modified a few features that I really didn't like. I always thought my nose was too big, so I had it made smaller. My chin was a little weak, so I had that fixed. Just a couple of small modifications. Since I always hated my chin, I had maintained a goatee since I was 18 years old. Now with my chin reshaped, I began going smooth-shaven. With just a couple of minor changes, I looked completely different than I did before. The trucking company that owned the rig that plowed into me was paying for it anyway. One other change was that I was also in much better shape. I was always fit, but not overly so. Sure, I spent a couple of hours a week in the gym, but it wasn't exactly hardcore workouts. It was mainly just to keep me from getting soft. After the accident, I had to go through some rather rigorous physical therapy that got me into the habit of working out harder. Yeah, it sucked at first, but I soon discovered that it made me feel a lot better. I began to also notice that I was looking better as well. Before, my stomach was flat. Now it had a defined hard six-pack. My chest, legs, and arms bulked up as I added muscle. I went from an average sort of thin office worker to a muscular, confident man. Yes, it was totally their fault. The driver was on speed, had been driving for too long that day, had forged his logbook, and the truck was lacking in proper maintenance. I ended up owning the company after that. I immediately instituted new safety rules and ended up firing 5 drivers. The reputation of the company improved, and we were getting more business. I had to sit with the NTSB regulators and outline my plan for improvements first. I kept them updated. Once the insurance company saw what I was doing, the insurance rates dropped as well. It didn't take long for my new policies to get around, and the reputation of the business increased dramatically. We delivered on time and safely. I had hired a couple of new mechanics and made sure that all the trucks and trailers were properly maintained. So between my consulting business, the trucking company, and a plethora of good investments, I was very well off. And now I was looking across the room at my ex-wife for the first time in 10 years. Those old feelings of betrayal and anger began to surface again. Sure, I got all of them out of my life, but they never got punished for what they did to me. I never got any real revenge on any of them. That's when an evil plan began forming in my head. I would pay them back, just the same way they betrayed me. It was obvious that Bev hadn't recognized me. She had walked right past me, looked directly at me, and smiled. It was one of those smiles that women give to a man that they are attracted to. It wasn't really flirty, just probably unconsciously telling him that she finds him attractive. This was going to be fun. I knew her weaknesses and motivations. It was just a matter of using the proper bait on the hook. I had exactly the proper bait I needed for this. Suddenly, I had a thought. I pulled out my phone and checked the date. Yep, perfect. My plans expanded to include even more destruction. I just needed to convince her that it was safe. I sauntered over to the booth she was at. I really had no use for anything that her company provided, but she didn't need to know that. I began looking at the brochures on the table, pretending to be interested. "Do you have any questions about any of our products or services?" a feminine voice asked. Pretending to see her for the first time, I answered, "Actually, I do have a few questions, but I am afraid that I don't really have the time right now to properly get all the information I would like. I am interested in a couple of products, and I am looking at needing a large supply of each. Unfortunately, I am on my way to a meeting right now." "Oh, okay. Can you stop back by later?" "Unfortunately, I won't be available until about 7 o'clock this evening. I believe that's when the expo closes tonight. Tell you what, here's my card. I'm basically just going to be hanging out in my hotel this evening, so give me a call, and I can meet you somewhere and answer all of your questions." Yep, the prospect of placing a big order had her interested. Now to get her to buy. "How about this? I'll make dinner reservations at Mario's for 7 o'clock. It's right here in the hotel, and I have heard it's one of the best Italian restaurants in the city. You can meet me there for dinner, and we can discuss what your company has to offer." Deliberately looking down at her left hand, I added, "And you can bring your husband along as well. After all, it's a business dinner. Oh, and here's my card. My name is Marv Anderson. I own Mac Industries LLC. I have a few different businesses that could use some of your products." Her smile got bigger. She probably didn't know anything about me personally, but she was very well aware of Mac Industries LLC. I could practically see her eyes springing out of her head in the shape of dollar signs. She then took more than a quick look at the tailored Armani suit I was wearing. "That would be great. It will just be me, though. My husband couldn't make it this time." "That's okay. Do you want to ask any of your colleagues to join us as well?" As if she wasn't about to share any commission with anyone else. "Unfortunately, they will all be unavailable. It will just be myself. I'm sure that I can answer all your questions." I gave her a big smile and sauntered off across the room to the exit. No, I didn't have a meeting to go to. I went back to my suite, of course. I was in a penthouse suite to prepare for my revenge. After showering, shaving, and everything else to get ready, I got dressed in another Armani suit. Couldn't wear the one I had on earlier. That would just show that I wasn't as rich as I needed to be. When I arrived at the restaurant lobby, I saw Bev was already there. She had apparently gone all out to impress. Her LBD was cut low, and the hemline was high. She was standing in 5-inch CFMs, and I was going to be interested in whether or not she was wearing thigh highs or stockings and a garter belt. The plunging neckline made it obvious that she had foregone a bra, and I couldn't make out any panty lines where the tight dress molded itself to her delectable hips. Forget needing to dangle the bait in front of her. She was letting me hand-feed it directly into her mouth. This was going to be so easy. It was almost boring. Okay, so she actually did answer all my questions over dinner. She also explained why her product was superior to the competition's. We discussed costs and quantities. I made the appropriate noises about being impressed, and that when we were ready to place the order, she would be the one we called. I couldn't place the order this week because we were still in the process of determining exactly how large the order would be, how many units of each would go to which location, and a few other issues. Whatever order we did place would be within the next 2 weeks. Little did she know that I had absolutely no use for any of her products, and even if I did, I wouldn't purchase them from her company. I would go to her largest competitor instead. Dinner over, I suggested it was still early, and maybe we could hit the nightclub next door for a drink or two. She was more than happy to comply. I'm pretty sure that while she was getting ready for dinner, she took the opportunity to look up my information on the internet. It would show her that I was indeed as wealthy as I appeared. The way she held my arm and molded herself to me as we danced, I couldn't help but wonder if she were thinking of trading up again. After a couple of drinks and several dances, we were up in my suite. No, she wasn't drunk. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was the one who suggested it. Yeah, I could see the dollar signs shining in her eyes. Oh, and I had discovered as we were sitting in the club that she was indeed not wearing panties. Instead of even the slightest protest as I had slid my hand up her thigh, she just smiled and spread her legs wider in invitation. "I'm not on the pill," she huffed as I was kissing and nibbling on her neck and earlobe. "Don't worry. I've been snipped. Allergic to latex, so I can't use condoms," I replied. "I would love it," she smiled. She probably should have thought a bit more about it, but I was doing everything I could to distract her. We went 3 rounds that night. The next day, she moved all her things into my suite. We had sex every night. "So, is there a Mrs. Anderson, fiancée, or girlfriend?" she asked on the last morning of the conference. I was wondering if she would eventually ask about that. It was blatantly obvious that my left hand was unadorned. Now, maybe I could have a bit more fun with this. No, I was married for a couple of years, but we split up. We just drifted apart. We were too young when we got married, and we ended up divorced. I haven't found anyone else yet, but I keep looking. I'm thinking that it's time I settled down now. Well, I would definitely like to see you again. I find myself becoming quite attracted to you. It's not just that you are a fantastic lover, but I also enjoy our conversations, and just being with you. What about your husband? You being married might cause some issues if we were to begin dating full-time. We're really no more than roommates right now. We don't even sleep in the same room. I can't even tell you the last time we had sex. Before I can start putting any real effort into a relationship, I need to deal with several business issues. I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling for the next few months. I'll get a hold of you when I'm through if you're still available. After 2 more rounds of sex, we cleaned up, packed up, and checked out of the hotel. She went her way, and I went mine. With the promise of keeping in touch, I ripped up her business card and tossed it in the trash as I was getting ready to board the airplane. The next Monday, I contacted a security firm that I kept on retainer. They were to keep a close eye on Bev and my former family for at least the next few months. Contrary to what she had told me, she and her husband were far from simply roommates. The security firm managed to place hidden cameras and microphones inside the house. They averaged having sex 3 to 4 times a week. Yeah, it was illegal as heck, but this security company was really good at getting information. I didn't care about most of the crap they did, but I was needing some specific information. One thing I found out was that, surprisingly, Brad was completely faithful to Bev. At least he was now. Can't say for sure about the previous 10 years. He was also wanting another kid, preferably a boy. I also found out that they had a ritual for the night before either one of them had to travel. They each tried to wear the other one out with sex. That made me smile. It was 2 months later when I got the last piece of news that I was hoping for. I watched the camera feeds as she was setting up the living room for when Brad got home from work. I watched the reveal. When Brad stepped through the door, "Congratulations, Daddy. You managed to knock me up again." He was stunned, then overjoyed. "How far along are you?" he asked. "About 2 months. You must have done it either the night before I had to leave for that week-long conference in Las Vegas, or it was the night I got back." Apparently, she still believed that I was shooting blanks. She did call and leave a message, tearfully telling me that she and her husband had reconciled. She wouldn't be able to run off with me now. That gave me a good chuckle. After that, I had the security company remove all the cameras and stop watching them. I could get the rest of the information on my own. I set a reminder on my Outlook calendar for a couple of months down the line. It was just about dead on 9 months after the conference. I was checking the birth announcements in my hometown. There was a picture of Bev holding a newborn baby boy with a smiling Brad looking over her shoulder. I had completed the changeover in management of all my companies, and I was now looking at the picture over the internet from my villa in Costa Rica. No, I wasn't going to stay holed up here forever. It was just one of the places around the world that I owned. Besides, I was no longer Marvin Anderson. Good luck finding him. Besides, he wouldn't matter anymore. They would soon figure out that was just an alias anyway. Time to finish my revenge. I switched over to a new Gmail account I had set up just for this. Now let's quickly see the story from the eyes of Beverly Curtis. It was 2 weeks since little Marvin was born. I'm still not completely sure how I managed to convince Brad to name him that. No, I was under no illusions that Marv was actually the father. Marv had a vasectomy and was shooting blanks. He even showed me the medical report he had done. Brad had managed to knock me up the night before I flew to the conference, or the night I got back home. I simply wanted to name him Marvin to secretly remind me of the fantastic week I had. My husband was ecstatic that we finally had a son. At first, he's been acting a bit weird since a couple of days after the birth. I'm not sure what's going on, but something just isn't right. I had just put the baby down for a nap. Jenny was in her room, probably texting with her friends. I was just about to start making dinner when the front door suddenly slammed open. "You cheating witch," Brad yelled at me. "How many times have you cheated on me?" I was shocked. I mean, there was no way that he could have found out about Las Vegas. Okay, sure, I had started thinking about trying to snag Marv. Brad did have a lot of money, but Marv was a whole lot wealthier. Then when I found out that Brad and I were going to have another baby, I just couldn't leave Brad. "What are you talking about, Brad? I've never cheated on you. Seriously, it's been over 9 months since that conference in Vegas. There's no possible way he could have found out. At least there could not possibly be any proof now." He threw an envelope at me. It was at that point that I noticed his parents and the twin sisters had followed him into the house. I managed to just barely catch the envelope before it fell to the floor. "Who the heck is he, Brad? I don't have the slightest idea what you were talking about." About 2 weeks ago, I got an email with a link to a website showing a load of videos of you screwing some strange guy while you were at the conference in Las Vegas 9 months ago. It also suggested that I get a DNA test done on the baby. It said that there would be a couple of surprises in there. One big surprise is that I'm not the biological father. He took several deep breaths, then continued, "I want to know who Marvin's real father is." I was shocked. Brad is his real father. That's when I opened the envelope. It was the result of a DNA test. It said that Brad was not the father. Well, actually, it said that there was only about a 40% chance that he was the father. Marvin carried some of the DNA Brad carried, but there was some other DNA that neither of us possessed. "Look, Brad, it shows that you and Marvin carried the same DNA." "No, it says that he carries only some of the same DNA. At best, it says that I would be in." He stopped speaking and got a really strange look on his face. "Oh my God. Michael, that scream came from my mother-in-law." No, it couldn't be. Sure, there might have been a very slight resemblance, but Marv couldn't be Michael. DNA doesn't lie. Brad was definitely not the father, but he was a close relative of the real father. There were no other male relatives except Brad's father close enough to be a match, and I had definitely not had sex with my father-in-law. Marv was the only other man I'd slept with, and I realized that week was my fertile time. I was absolutely shocked. Suddenly, I began thinking, Michael was a genius with computers. How hard would it have been for him to fake a medical document like that? Then I remembered those 2 abortions where I took care of the 2 times that I had accidentally gotten pregnant by Michael. I had purposely avoided having any children from him. Now, in the irony of all ironies, I just had his son. I had cheated on Michael with his brother. I had now accidentally cheated on Brad with Michael. He knew, and he did it on purpose. I screamed out. "What are you talking about?" Nathan asked. I didn't recognize him. He looked completely different than he did 10 years ago. I'm sure he recognized me, though. He knew all the right buttons to push. He knew exactly what he was doing. He seduced me. He told me that he had a vasectomy. He even showed me a medical report. My cycle is as regular as clockwork. He must have remembered that I would be at my peak fertility that week. Oh my God, he must have remembered that I had those 2 abortions and purposely avoided having his children. Well, screw him. He sued me for Jenny's child support, so now I'm going to sue him for his own child support. Much as Michael Curtis had disappeared before, Marvin Anderson no longer existed. Brad's attempted child support suit went exactly nowhere. You can't sue someone that doesn't exist. Brad and Bev ended up staying together. He would be on the hook for child support for both Jenny and Marvin until they graduated from college. He would also have to pay child support, spousal support, the mortgage on the house, and at least half of all their assets. It was cheaper to keep her. They stayed together, but their relationship was permanently destroyed. Now they were living in a loveless marriage and simply became roommates with benefits. They still had sex occasionally, but it was just sex. There was no more making love. Now it was simply 2 people relieving their urges. They sold the house and quietly split up as soon as Marvin left for college. Don't worry about little Marvin. Sure, he was not the offspring of the favored brother, but he was still a cute, happy baby. His grandparents still spoiled him, and his mother still had her maternal instincts. The decision was made to never let anyone know about his true parentage. Besides, Brad always did want a son. They never did have any more children. As for me, I did end up getting married again. We have 3 children, 1 boy and 2 girls. I dote on them constantly. Every once in a while, I do think about my other son out there. Yes, it would be nice to visit with him and have him in my life, but that is simply not a possibility. Perhaps after he turns 18, I might see about quietly reaching out to him. When I finally die, he will be in for a shock. He is included in my will. As for my parents, I sent them 4 anonymous emails. The first one told them that I got married. Obviously, they were not at the wedding, and they never got to meet their new daughter-in-law. The other 3 emails were to tell them about the births of their grandchildren that they would never see. That was my punishment for them. I hear that they have spent a fortune on private investigators looking for me and my children. Good luck with that. So, you probably think I am a real jerk for what I did. I won't really argue with you on that. Just keep in mind what they did to me. I think I deserved a little payback. My brother cucked me, so I turned it around and cucked him. She purposefully refused to have my children when we were married, preferring to have my brother father her daughter. So I tricked her into having my son while she was married to my brother. I think that's justice. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.